Hey y'all, I'm Casey Kasem and this is my podcast, Get Real with Casey Kasem. It's the podcast that goes behind the scenes of the fantasy football industry through interviews with people in the fantasy football space. On this episode, I got to talk with Sam Holt, someone you may know from Fantasy Focused, the fantasy debate with Sam and Tate, and one-on-one with Sam Holt. You can find Sam on Twitter at Samantha R. Holt, as well as on Instagram at Sam_awesome. Sam and I talked about her rise in the fantasy football industry, having an interview podcast, being a Steelers fan in California, and a ton more. And we also talked about her brand new career opportunity with drroto.com as a fantasy football analyst. You can find me on Twitter at TheCaseyKasem. You can follow the pod on Twitter at GetReal_pod. You can find my writing with the Fantasy Footballers at TheFantasyFootballers.com. Hey, and I'm also now the social media manager for Dynasty Trade Calculators, so go check them out. This podcast is a proud member of the DAP Network. This podcast has a Patreon. Yep, help the show grow. Join the Patreon now, patreon.com/CaseyKasem. That's KACEYKASEM. You only need to donate a few bucks a month. Come be a part of the Stay Rad crew. Your support is greatly appreciated. Become a member to submit questions for guests, exclusive content, a look at the new merch line that's about to drop. Yep, I wore one of those shirts to the Fantasy Football Expo and people were asking me about them. Well, they'll be out shortly. Also, a ton more stuff is coming. The Patreon is in its beginning stages. I'm trying to get it bigger and better. You can help that out. If you want to be a part of it, go check it out. Again, it's patreon.com/CaseyKasem. If you want to help to grow the show even more and you don't want to make a monetary donation, that is totally fine. I'm totally down with that. That's fine. If you could do me a favor and rate and review this podcast, that would be so awesome. It really does help. You might not think it does, but it does a lot for the podcast. Also, a huge thank you to Trophy Smack for being an affiliate of Get Real with Casey Kasem. This is a spot to check out if you're looking for fantasy football trophies, belts, rings, draft boards, and more. I have an affiliate link. It'll be listed in the description, and you can check out the link in order to view all the rad items that they have. They have free shipping, free engraving, and 100% satisfaction guaranteed. I've been a fan of theirs for a while. When I was at the expo, I met them, and they are great people, so go check out what they have to offer. Make sure to use the discount code GetRealPod for a free ring with the purchase of a trophy or belt. Note you must have both the trophy or belt plus ring in your cart for the discount to apply. Live draft season is upon us, so what are you waiting for? All right, with all of that out of the way, we've got our conversation with Sam Holt coming to you right now. Yay, here we go. How exciting. I'm so glad that you could join tonight. It's very nice of you, Sam, to get here through all the traffic you had to go through tonight.
I know. The LA traffic is just, one of those things. It's never going to go away. I mean, the only time it was actually officially gone was during COVID and lockdown when we were, what was it called? We had a curfew too. So like you're rushing to get where you need to go. It's like, then there's no one. It was the weirdest thing being able to get places in like literally 10 minutes. And you're like, wow, traffic really is that bad here.
That is insane to think about. Like, wow. Yes. We'll get to talking more about California in a little bit, but I want to start out, since people are tuning in to get kind of more information about you. How did you, well, before we talk about how you got started in fantasy football, when you were growing up, were you a fan of sports?
Yeah, I was an avid sports fan. I mean, I was the kid that, was not athletic in any sense of the word. My parents' rule was you have to try a sport, and if you don't like it, then it's fine, but you have to at least try. And I think after just soccer with me, they're like, okay, this isn't going to be our athlete student like here. My brother is a natural athlete. He played every single sport growing up. So it was like, clearly that's his track, and I'm just not physically able to perform in that way that everyone else can. I tend to get like hit in the face with the ball every single time. It's not my fault. That level of coordination I never had. But that aside, super competitive family, really into watching all kinds of sports. Football and basketball and soccer were pretty big in our house. Huge Laker household for me. And then I grew up a Steelers fan because of my dad. So that was something I did naturally grow up with. But then going into college, I got an even bigger passion for football because I was introduced to fantasy football in college.
Okay, so let's talk about more of that journey into fantasy football. How exactly did that come about?
Well, naturally, like anyone else jumps into fantasy football, it's someone else has a league and they have a spot and they're like, hey, you like football. Is there a chance you'd want to play fantasy? And I said, well, I don't know anything about it. And of course, as people that just want to fill a league, they're like, perfect. Someone who doesn't know anything just to take a roster spot. Perfect. So I fell in, and I actually had a pretty good, decent season for my first season. I think I ended up in the top 4 of a 12-team league. And I was like, hey, you know what? If I had a little bit more knowledge here, I would be able to put together a winning team. And that league that I joined, I'm still in. It's a dynasty league now. It's a league that's evolved. So since college, lots of the same people. It's grown. And it's one of those leagues where every year we add an extra rule because our fever for ridiculousness in fantasy just grows year after year. So now it's dynasty, it's IDP, it's super flex, it's half point PPR just to make it more difficult because it's not full point PPR. But it's just one of those leagues that as I've gotten more into fantasy, that league has grown. And now I'm in like 10 leagues a year.
How do you get a league like that that's been around for this long to make changes like that? Because I know a lot of people have that concern. They want to change over and they don't know how to go about that.
Absolutely. I think, first of all, I mean, the reason why I think a lot of us play fantasy football is because we have a group of friends that we have a camaraderie with that, you know, it just takes it to the next level. And that's the kind of group of friends that I'm very grateful to have in that league. And it's guys from college, other guys that kind of got brought in of friends. And now we're just a super close league. We're very, very similar into how like the show the league is.
Mm-hmm.
We spend tons of time together. We do a destination draft every year.
Cool.
And then every year, in order to decide on rules, we have an annual rules meeting. So we sit down, even if it's for, you know, an hour, 2 hours at times, although we've been doing Zoom rule meetings since last year, and the meetings are much faster. You just get everyone on a call, everyone reads a rule, you go around and you vote. And then if it's not, you know, over a 50% majority, then the rule doesn't pass. So we have an Excel sheet that keeps track of all the rule changes. It's that nitty gritty. But when you want to have a league that's got all these extra little nuances, you have to have something to hold everyone accountable, but then also make sure that everyone participating is on board and they're not going to be the taco of the league and not actually pay attention.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of rules that are put in place so that you don't go over your salary cap. I'm someone that tends to overspend money. So now there's a bunch of penalties for people like me. So, but that keeps it fun, that it keeps you honest, and that makes it more competitive at the end of the season.
For sure. I mean, that's great advice. My home league, we always have the one that doesn't set the lineup or doesn't do anything. And then you're like, but at least this year she's like, you know what? I'm going to be a cheerleader on the sideline. So at least she got that this year. So you said it started off and turned into a dynasty league. So was it redraft that you started playing?
Yeah. At first it was redraft, and it was just a standard league. Nothing fancy with points. And I think that it was good for all of us to have that for a couple of years to get used to it. And then we decided to make it Dynasty. That was the first change that we did. And in terms of Dynasty, we decided, okay, I think the first year it was 8 keepers. And then we really liked the idea of doing IDP. So we pretty immediately did that because we all just got tired of streaming defenses. And we're all such avid football fans anyways. It's fun for us to have those defensive players to root for. And it does add a whole different level of strategy when you're drafting, and in order to make sure that you're pulling in those extra points, because we've had people end up in the championship that shouldn't have based on their offense, but because their defensive players were that big stars, they got them in. So it evolved after that, and then we went half point PPR, and then we decided, okay, we need a rookie draft because we want to be able to field, you know, these potential rookies coming in, and it helps balance out our drafts as they come in, and it's evolved from there. Now we've got 13 keepers. We have a rookie draft. 13 keepers sounds like a lot, but we have a really big bench. I think it's like 8 roster spots, but that's because of all the IDP slots. And now we're full IDP, so we've got 6 IDP slots.
Do you think there's going to be anything else that you guys can add to that league, or are you guys all tapped out?
No, I think the next thing, honestly, because now we're super flex, the next thing I think would probably be doing some sort of taxi squad. That's kind of in the works. That's the next thing I think that we're going to evolve. And as I've talked to different people throughout the fantasy community, I'm learning more about these taxi squads, and I'm getting more on board. The only reason why we've hesitated on that is because we have so much value in those rookie picks that having a taxi squad, I feel like there's a level of competition between having the value in those rookies versus having the taxi growing squad. So I think what we might end up doing actually is after you've done the rookie draft, you select a couple players to go onto your taxi squad that you don't have on your roster for that first year. I think that's going to be our in-between.
I like it. Yeah. Nice, to the point. And exactly. That's what you need. So how did you find out that fantasy football could go beyond just playing it, that you could actually, there's a community and you can talk about it?
Well, I feel like my origin story is very similar to a lot of other people in that, I was a fan of the Fantasy Focus podcast that Matthew Berry has and his leagues. I entered into at the time they had their listeners league, and then they had a women's league. And the year that I entered to do that, I got into the women's league, but they had so many entrants that there had actually 2 women's leagues. So I got into that one. I did terrible in that league. I lost. It was horrible. It was not good. But after being in that league, being in touch with them, it kind of sparked more of an interest of like, oh, there's so much more to this. There's so much more to this. And I got to go and visit them at ESPN campus and tour the campus and hang out with them for the day. And that was a really good experience for me. It kind of opened up my eyes. And before I went, I obviously read Fantasy Life from Matthew Berry, which to me is not just a fantasy football book. It's like a life-changing book for me. It was a lot about taking risks in your career. And at the time, I had a job that I hated and I was nervous to make a change. And then I read that book and I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go for the job that I've wanted. And I did. I got it. And it really shifted my whole career path. I'm a graphic designer by trade. So I ended up getting a more design-oriented job, which I loved. And that was a huge shift for me. But back to fantasy really quick, because I can go on that whole rabbit hole, definitely. But with fantasy, after that experience, I got more into Twitter and following different people. And some people reached out to me and said, hey, would you want to write? And I said, absolutely. Why not? I used to love writing, when I was in school. Why not? I love football. Let's just dive into this more. And then it kind of became a thing of year after year, different podcasts reaching out to have me actually come on and talk about my articles. And then I realized how much I loved podcasting and just being able to talk. And I love having this one-on-one interaction like I am with you now. It's like, It's just fun to have 2 people that are obviously super passionate about football, but then have that shared space and know that other people are listening and they can take your advice and apply it to their league and they can win. It also sucks when you give advice and they lose, but at the same time, it's a lot of fun. And I love the challenge that it presents. So it's kind of year after year kind of snowballed until I was writing for the Fantasy Authority for a couple of years. And then I ended up working with Fantasy Focused, that group of guys there too, and had a couple podcasts of my own. So it kind of grew every year. And now it's like, whoa, what else do I do in my free time besides football? Nothing.
Nothing. Well, I mean, true. So when you started out, had you ever done any sort of, podcasting, being recorded, being on camera or anything like that?
Nope. I had absolutely zero experience doing anything on camera. Anytime my friends took videos, I always hated the sound of my voice. So I'm just like, why would I want to do that? No one wants to hear me talk. But, and every time I record, I have that little flutter of butterflies and nervousness. I'm still nervous every time I do it. But at the same time, because I've practiced it so much, I get more and more comfortable with every experience. And I've been podcasting, I think, if I had to count how many times I've podcasted since going from 0 to 100, I honestly have no idea. I've definitely recorded over 1,000 times on different podcasts, including my own. It's got to be multiple thousands by now. Last year, especially during lockdown, I know you and I were on a bunch of different podcasts. We were just jumping on. I was like podcasting 4 times a week. It felt like it was a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot, and I was like, man, I could do more too, but I was like, no, gotta find a balance.
You gotta get out of this chair.
Yeah, right. Jeez. So going back to hit on something that you were talking about how you went to college, graphic design, and how, when you were growing up, what did you want to do with your life originally? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, when I grew up, well, I mean, as an art student, and I was always top of my class in art in high school and all that. And in college, I was always really good at illustration and drawing. Unfortunately, at the time, I kind of was a bit lost as to what to do with that in my career. So I got my Bachelor of Fine Arts in illustration from Long Beach State. And with that, I kind of looked at that and was thinking, well, am I going to illustrate children's books my whole life? Or could I go into, I really got into movie concept art, and that felt really competitive. And I always took a bunch of extra computer art classes on the side. And I was like, I'm not going to be a graphic designer. And I don't want to do that. Just working with fonts all day. Why do I want to do that? Logos. But then after college, it kind of felt like the most of the jobs that I was getting or could get had to do with graphic design, production art, that type of thing. And I just threw my hat into the ring. And thankfully, I had those extra classes and under my tool belt. And was able to create a career out of that. And now I'm a graphic design manager for a health and fitness company. I oversee 5 other graphic designers. It's really just evolved. And a lot like fantasy football, I kind of ended up like, oh, looking back, how did I get here? Okay, interesting.
So the balance between your job doing that and then also being involved as much as you are in the fantasy football industry, how do you manage to make sure that you're spending enough time with both and that you're not spreading yourself too thin?
That's something that's a constant work in progress for me. I think that I am definitely a workaholic. Mm-hmm. I sometimes wish I wasn't. And there's some times where I spend a weekend and I'm like, I'm not a workaholic. I'm going to do nothing this weekend. And then by Monday, I'm so miserable from doing nothing that I just don't know how to deal with myself. So for me, it is already a difficult balance. But what I like to do is I like to set up just small goals. So if I am trying to podcast, at least for myself, recording my own show, I like to do that at least once a week if I can. And then I'll be writing this coming year. We can talk more about that a bit later, but I'm going to try and do at least 1 article a week. So already there, I'm kind of limiting myself. Okay, I'm not doing 10 articles a week. It's 1. I'm not doing 1 show of my own or multiple. It's just 1. And then I'll agree to, jump on guest podcasts and things like that as well. So I'm trying to start myself off this year, different than last year, with smaller goals in terms of what to do. So I'm trying to put a lot more quality into that small than quantity. I feel like years before, it's like, how much more can I do? How much more can I do? And now I know that's not sustainable for what I'm currently doing, balancing my work and this on the side, which is very much like a complete second job. But it's a work in progress is all I can say. And the only thing that's helping me is just the passion for it. And I know I don't want to quit this, but I also don't want to burn myself out. So how can I best manage my self-care in between these 2 amazing things that I've gotten into?
Right on. That's great advice. I mean, it really is. And I know it's something that a lot of people struggle with. And I've seen it a lot come across my timeline and stuff as of late. People just, life comes at you fast sometimes.
It absolutely does. And, it's last year, I think, put a lot in perspective for me in terms of, what you're capable of doing, if you're stuck at home and in lockdown and all of these things, but also how important self-care is going back and forth between actually being in the working, and going out, going to your job, and then being shoved back at home for months and then feeling like you're just trapped on an island and then going back into the workforce. That whiplash effect affected me a lot, emotionally, mentally. And the biggest takeaway I had was if I don't take away time just for myself to completely unplug, put that phone away and actually just, I have to literally I'll have to put a face mask on, paint my nails so I literally can't touch anything. That's my way of okay, now you're sitting and doing nothing. You can't fold laundry, you can't do anything. You have to just sit and be in the calm. That's kind of the biggest thing that I took away from last year was self-care was important. So not losing that going into this year with all the things I want to accomplish, it's just, you have to have yourself in check. I kind of have to keep saying hey, what are you doing? Every week, just gotta, okay, what are we doing? Are you pushing yourself too much? It's just having that moment with yourself to check in.
And I love when people come on the show and say stuff like that really clicks. It's like, yeah, that's exactly, how I feel as well. And I think this last year has really, been one of those trying times that people are learning how to care for themselves. And so, yeah, taking the whiplash, I felt that too. So, let's talk about something more fun than whiplash. Let's talk about writing in general. Before you started writing for for fantasy football purposes, had you done any type of writing besides just your normal essay for school?
Yeah, mostly it was just those creative writing essays that I really enjoyed, and I like to journal once in a while as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'd started a couple because I really enjoyed creative writing. I'd started a couple screenplays like years back, and that was just kind of a fun creative outlet to open up a Google Doc and just kind of go off into a storyland, let it be, and then open up a new one. So I had a lot of those going.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that I think maybe because of my artistic side, I just like being able to not just paint, but paint with words. I like being creative in how you say things.
Mm-hmm.
And translating that into fantasy football is also very difficult as well, because you can't get too flowery with your language when you just want to be, cut and dry and to the point, which running back is going to be the guy this week. So it was an interesting balance, but also a fun way to learn a new language, if that makes sense. And I think there's a creative way to go from not just having sentence after sentence saying, and he had over 4,000 passing yards this season and over 30 touchdowns. Is he going to have that this season? It's fun to try and open that up and do it different ways every single time, because no one wants to read the same thing over and over again. They can look at stats for that. They can look at a spreadsheet, but they're coming to you to hear your voice. So putting your voice also into that is a fun challenge for me.
And for people who are just now starting out writing in the fantasy football space, what is the biggest piece of advice that you think you could give to them? I know that's kind of a cliche question, but what would you throw out there for people that are listening?
Not a cliche question at all. I always love hearing everyone's response to questions like that, because I feel like even if you are just starting out or you've been doing it for a while, it's helpful to hear how people manage that. So for me, I think that when you're writing something, when you're done writing it and you look back and read it, did you enjoy reading it yourself? Because the whole point is people are going to spend that time reading it because they're going to enjoy it. And they're only going to look to read your article if there's something different about it to everyone else's. And the only thing that's going to be right off the bat easiest for you to make yours different, put yourself into that article, put your personality into that article, because it's going to make it far more fun. And it's going to feel like as I'm reading it, I'm sitting next to you getting to hear this advice, because it's going to be far more personal. So having that personal touch to your article is going to really set yourself apart. And then besides that, I mean, put something else in there that's different than any other statistic or a site's going to have. Like, obviously, I know how many yards someone's going to have, but give me a good comparison. Take that and really extrapolate it. So, like, if I'm breaking down an offense, like Carolina's offense, and how they work, give me the reason why so-and-so is going to have that much better of a season compared to someone else, and pull another random team in there and really show, okay, well, compared to this team, like Tyreek Hill is a number one receiver, and the reasons why he hits that is because of all these marks. Show me how this player measures up to someone like that. So that really gets me thinking, okay, this guy's got potential. If you're showing me that his floor is more than what his stats are showing, then that gets me excited. Break down why the schedule's so good in between these couple weeks. Like, really peel the onion, get the layers out, and that'll be more fun.
That'll be more fun. And then that's one of the biggest things that I have an issue or have a problem in doing, is that I overthink about wanting to like do something that I don't do, which is stats. That's just not me. I'm oblivious to things, but yeah, that's just not how I roll. So that's just how it goes.
No, I'm the exact same way. I cannot. I'm not someone that can rattle off stats, which is one of those things that you see on Twitter all the time, where women get asked all the time, "Oh, well, you like football, so tell me about so and so's record from 1975." It's like, I'm sorry, I'm terrible at numbers anyway. Like, I'm not going to remember.
I'm not going to remember that.
But what I can do is break down comparing these two players for you, and I'll use those numbers to support my thesis, but I can expand upon that. Besides that, I can take in, okay, well, they got a new quarterback. they've got this new receiver that's a veteran that's going to help take the pressure off. Like there's so many other ways to dissect things than just spouting off 1,000 yards, touchdowns, blah, 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 yards after the catch. There's so many more things that you can do. Use those to support it. Absolutely. Like that's going to help validate your point, but it doesn't need to be everything. Allow it support, but you have so many other things you can build with it.
That's the same thing as like when you're wearing a band shirt and somebody's like, name 3 songs from that band. You're a poser, you know? So like,
oh my
really?
God, that's probably one of the things that I get so annoyed with is like, I like music. I don't remember any of the song titles. There's times when I'm like, oh, I think I know that artist, but then I get the artist completely wrong and they didn't actually sing that song. Someone else did. I'm like, ask me anything else. I like music, but in terms of remembering the numbers and the stats on music, I cannot remember a band name to save my life. All I know is Blink-182 was like, you know, the anthem of my life in middle school. And I loved those albums back then. I cannot answer anything about current albums.
It's okay. It's okay. The music nowadays, I mean, Blink-182 era is probably one of the, you know, good Blink-182, I love Blink-182 as well, but I'm just going to say, you know, there's an era that like is so nostalgic. Yeah, and it takes you back to.
I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so great. So podcasting is an interesting jump from writing, or at one point it was. Now it's more and more people are doing it. But when you first got started in the podcasting game, how was that experience?
It was a good experience, actually. Like looking back, I felt very encouraged by the people that brought me on and the people that had me guest. They were very much like, no, we want to hear your voice. And it was because, you know, based on what I would post on Twitter or based on what I wrote in my articles, people want to hear a voice to those words. And that's, I think, the biggest drive in why people want to hear a different podcaster. Like, yes, people love reading Matthew Berry's Love Hate, but it's also really fun to hear him go off on jokes and all these different things on their podcast. That's really fun to tie those two things together, because when you're reading that, now you've got that person's voice in your head when you're reading it, and that's more personal. So to me, I'm just very grateful for the people that first asked me to go onto their podcasts back then, because they were very encouraging. And every time we finished, I'm like, oh my God, I hope that sounded okay. Please tell me that sounded like. They're like, stop freaking out. You sounded great. Just be yourself. Everyone told me the same advice. Be yourself. We're just talking about football and you like football, so this isn't going to be hard. It's like, yeah, this isn't going to be hard. You're not going to ask me anything I don't know because we're talking about football, and I love that.
And yeah, I feel the same way when I'm like, oh my gosh, and then I freeze up for like 5 minutes, and then I'm fine, So yeah, it is you get more comfortable the more reps you get. So
yeah, absolutely.
How much longer after you started writing did you start doing podcasting?
I think I was writing for, I want to say, 1.5 years before I started podcasting. And that was just being brought on as a guest to not just talk about my articles that I'd written. This was for Fantasy Authority, but it was like a weekly show that they had, and they just wanted to hear my take on A player, B player, C player. They just wanted to take my temperature on how my Steelers were doing, because everyone knows I'm an avid Steelers fan. So that was kind of the icebreaker for me was, oh, well, you love this team, so clearly you must pay attention. It's like, yes, I do pay attention to my team. Please ask me my team questions. I enjoy
that. So going from, working with one site to working with another site, and the progression that you've had over the years, how has it changed since the beginning? Like, how were the different levels? How did it change in between each? Did your expectations change any as you moved from one site to another, or
personal goals changed as those changes happened? So it was a very natural progression of, being a guest and coming on once in a while, and then having other sites reach out to me and say, hey, would you be a guest on our show? But then also, next season, would you like to have a more one-on-one working relationship with us? And then it was like, okay, yeah, I do want to graduate to that next level and, be more of the host behind the mic rather than just,
right.
And Sam's on this week. It's like, actually, right. I like hosting and I like being the one that gets to ask the questions. So that was kind of a natural progression, just going through the reps, like you said. after you have a certain number of reps, you kind of want to try something new just to see how you do with it. Some people enjoy hosting, some people really don't. And that was something that I didn't know if I would like or not until I tried it. And then once I did, I was like, oh my God, I love this. I love being in control. Not to like go too much behind the curtain, but you know, if you're one of those type A personalities like myself, being in control is kind of fun.
It is. It is. So taking the jump into having your own, hosting duties and having your own podcast, how was that experience? How did that happen? How did it come about?
That naturally came about just with the guys that I was working with and them saying, hey, you're on this weekly show. Would you want to host your own show? And of course I was like, what? You want me to host my own show? Are you sure? Okay. I guess I can do that. And then I got a co-host for that show. My first hosting one was with the fantasy debate with Sam and Tate, with me and my co-host Derek Tate. And what was great about that, and I think is super helpful for anyone that is podcasting, if you have that person that can be your B-side to the record. For me, Tate, he's just so good at being we're a good duo together. We bounce off each other well. And so there's never a lull in the conversation because we naturally have so many other things we can joke about besides football. We're both huge nerds in terms of like super into Star Wars and Harry Potter and all that fun stuff. And Marvel, of course. But like having that be able to like take the lull out when you're trying to transition between different teams, different players, it makes it more of a natural conversation, and that makes it more fun for others to listen to as well, because it's like, oh, well, they get along really well and you can hear it in their rapport. So that naturally kind of gave me more courage to think, okay, well, I do really well with this duo. It would be fun to see if I can do interviews. And then that's when I said, hey, I want to do my one-on-one with, and that was last year in COVID when I was like, hey, let's just see if we can get better at interviewing. And that was just a really fun exploration just to see how it would go. And I was lucky enough to get some pretty fun guests.
Yes, very rad. We will touch on that in a second because I really have a lot of questions about your interview style and how we're not jumping ahead. So I will. So when you decided that, you wanted to have a co-host, well, how was that process of having a co-host anyway? How did you come about that?
Well, in the group that I was with Fantasy Focused, there were there was a total of 4 of us a part of the crew. And it was just, hey, I have this great rapport with you. Would you be interested? I'm down. And what's great about Derek is he also was so encouraging. Like, you know what? I want you to hold the reins. Like, I think different than other people that I've necessarily talked to in the community, not saying names, but he's a guy that was like, I don't want to be the guy hosting and you are the secondary. I want you to be the lead as the woman, and I want to be the secondary person that just chimes in. I want you to have that floor, that platform. Let's get you to that level. And that was really encouraging. So just being able to have someone that, he just really was very selfless as a co-host. And I think, and I try to be that way with him as well. And so when you're just thinking, I'm not trying to be the winner here, I'm trying to get us both to win. It's important to have that really good dynamic, to find that person that can be the full balance, the yin and yang, if you will.
The yin and yang, if you will. And, having a co-host, you have to get like your schedule down. You have to do all of that, make sure that you guys are on the same page. Was there any concern that, it wasn't going to work, or that maybe podcasting wasn't going to take off the way that it did?
Yeah, you always have that concern. And then there's always going to be weeks because life happens. Like it just happens. There's things that come up, family things that come up, and you have to be out of town. They're out of town. It's just more about, understanding that things happen and not getting too beat up about it and being like, you know what? We didn't record for 3 weeks. It is what it is. Let's just get back on that horse and just keep going, because you can't just give up. Like, yeah, it's going to be tough. And there's times when you just can't. And absolutely, family is a number one priority. Work is a priority. If you have to set it aside, you have to. And it's important to know that and give yourself a break when you do that. Don't beat yourself up if something comes up and you can't record. Because there's always tomorrow. There's always another day. You're always going to be able to do something. But trying to be close to a schedule is definitely helpful in terms of growing your audience. That's always going to be something that, oh, on Wednesday nights, Sam and Tate are going to be recording. I got to make sure I tune in for that. Going live is super helpful for that. And also really fun way to kind of get those butterflies out easily because you're live. So you can have a little joke in between rather than have a pause between sections of commentary, and you can have people jump in with comments, and that makes it a little bit more organic as well. But it's just important to know if you can't record, it's not the worst thing in the world, but you have goals and you just try and keep plugging away at them every time.
So how is living in a time zone that people kind of just ignore about, right? Because
everyone ignores Pacific Standard Time. What is the deal?
So like anytime somebody is, for the most part, it's always, we're not going to get into Eastern or anything like that. We're not going to have time zone wars, but sure. There's other people out there that have different time zones. So do you ever find it to be a little hard to schedule things because people are, on the other side of the United States? Or even the other side of the world.
Oh, no, completely. I think that's probably one of the biggest struggles, to be honest, besides just scheduling, is just the fact that I am in Los Angeles and everyone else is up 3 hours earlier than me. So my notifications on Twitter are always insane when I first wake up. And then trying to keep up with the emails is always a pain. And then people say, hey, can you jump on? It's like, I can, but you have to understand I'm coming home from work. You were so gracious with me today. I appreciate that. Like there's that in between time. So what I try and do there is I say, okay, I have a hard line of when I can say I can be on a show. And that's just because I know how long it takes me to go from work to home. And that's the soonest I can record. The later is better. But just being open with that and not letting yourself get down when things don't work out. It's like, oh, well, I'm going to miss that one. Okay, I'll jump on the next one, and then with my co-host who's always on Eastern time, it's Saturday mornings. I just grin and bear it, get up early, grab that coffee because he's ready to go at 10. And it's like, okay, 7 a.m. We're getting up at 6, throwing the coffee on. You just get a new ritual to get used to it. That's what I had to do every time we did our Sunday morning breakdowns. Right before every game, we'd be on live for 3 hours before the start at 10 a.m. my time. So that meant I had to get up an hour before that to get all this ready to be live. So you make sacrifices, but to me, the sacrifice was worth it because it was such a passion. Like you're going to make the sacrifice if you're in love with it.
Being in California, since we're talking about California and living there, and you're a Steelers fan, how is being a Steelers fan in California? How's that like?
It's not bad. Like, I think that I when I run into people and they're like, you're a Steelers fan? So you're from Pennsylvania? Like, no, I'm not. I grew up in California. Well, then how did that happen? And my reason is I'm a Steelers fan because of my dad. My dad's not from Pennsylvania. He's actually from England. When he moved to the States, almost 40 years ago, he didn't know anything about American football. But when he moved to Santa Monica, he went to one of the English pubs that was in there. Yes, there's a bunch of English pubs in Santa Monica, apparently. His friends taught him about football while watching a game, and the Steelers happened to be playing. And he picked them to win because their colors were close to his home team, his home soccer team. So Steelers won that game, and he said, all right, that's my team. So all the way from there to here, Steelers fan the whole way. So I'm just grateful that he picked the Steelers as his team. Like, what a great franchise to be a part of.
Right? Like, yeah, it could be way worse. It could be way worse. My dad, he is from Pennsylvania, and he grew up as an Eagles fan.
Oh, okay.
Moved to the Dallas area, when he met my mom, and became a Dallas Cowboys fan. And that's why I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, because of my dad. And I'm glad I'm not an Eagles fan. No offense to the Eagles fans, but I cannot imagine. I can't imagine. Okay.
Brutal, right?
Oh my gosh. And he gets crap because he changed, and he lives in Pennsylvania again. He lives back up there. And so
That's what it is. And then, you just got to respect the loyalty. Okay, he switched teams and he's just staying with that team. You got to respect that. And I think that, I have friends that they have their team based on the marriage that they have. They're like, okay, well, they're my second team. So having those allegiances is always helpful, I think. And it's always fun. There's nothing wrong with switching teams. I mean, I don't want to switch teams year to year, but if you got a good reason for it, just honor it.
For sure. I get that. So I want to go and talk about one-on-one with you. It's a wonderful, brilliant, awesome piece of work. And how did you were talking about how COVID made you kind of decide that you wanted to do it and get better at interviewing. What made you decide to just do it?
I would say it was more of a ripping the Band-Aid off kind of reaction. I was like, I want to get better at interviewing people. I feel like I need to get better at not just talking with the same people I talk with every week, but I want to meet new people. I want to talk to new people that I've talked to on Twitter and I haven't talked to in this type of format. And it was just like, you know what? The only way this is going to happen is if I make it happen. So I made it happen by saying to the guys, hey, I want to do my own show. And they said, do it whenever you want to do it. And then I tried to make it a little bit easier on myself. I said, you know what? I'll record whenever my guests can record. Then that as long as that happens, cool. And if it happens to be live, great. If not, no worries. We'll post it later. So trying to not put too many pressures on myself to begin with, not, oh, well, we have to get 5 podcasts done this week. Let's just see what the schedule does. We'll see what happens. If it comes out, great. If not, no big deal. We're just trying something new. And that's kind of how I started with it, was just saying, if I want to get better at this, I have to just start doing it. You just got to get those reps in.
And did you do any sort of research? Did you do any, get yourself prepared to interview, like maybe some sort of tip, or did you just go into it and see how it went?
Honestly, I think I listened to a couple interviews before where I just kind of had takeaways of like, I'd rather ask this type of question. I'd rather ask this type of question. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to model my stuff off of anyone else's. I just want to ask the questions that I have. I have questions and I want to be different in the way that I ask them, but I also just hope that it turns into a story that people enjoy listening to. Something I grew up with was family that really enjoyed those kind of story time moments and everyone gathered around and got to hear each other's stories. And I love that. I love having that connection with someone, even if it's not in a full group, it's just that one-on-one and hearing a story. So for me, it just came from that natural place of like, I just want to get to know this person better. And then if people tune in and they get to hear things out of it that they didn't know before, even better.
Why do you think it's so difficult for some people to interview people? Sometimes you'll listen to something and you're like, you're almost there, but
yeah, it's close, but it's not quite there. I think the thing that there's a lot of probably little things that why it's a little bit difficult for some people more than others, or why some people always have certain struggles. And I think it's just, you have to kind of get out of your own way in a sense. Like you have to just think, okay, I'm the only one that's going to make this awkward. I'm the only one that's going to, derail this. I just have to say, okay, I have these 5 questions. What kind of fun conversation can we have in between these 5 questions? Like, how can I just be my natural self? Like, just be you. Mm-hmm. Your natural fun self is going to be what makes people want to listen anyways. And then besides that, I think we kind of hear these press conferences and we hear these reporters ask the same question over and over again. Yeah. So you don't want to be that person just asking the same question over and over again. But you can also ask a similar question and get a fun response that not everyone's gotten. So you have to take that risk. It's okay to ask someone a question that they've heard before. It's okay because they're not going to say the same story exactly the same way every single time. They're not. You're going to get a little anecdote that they maybe didn't give someone else. And then you can pluck at that string and let that unfold in a different way. So it's also not asking the same questions, but then also not being too nervous to ask that question, because you can tack something on to the end of that question that could get you a second response that other people didn't get.
Yeah, I love when that happens because it gives you a whole new set of questions you can ask. You can go down a whole different path. And so it's kind of like a choose your own adventure interview. I love it.
Choose your own adventure.
There you go. So as someone who has an interview podcast, that would be me. Yeah. And you're someone who has an interview podcast that's had it for a while. And I watch you and I listen to you and wow. Like, I was re-listening to some of your stuff earlier and I was like, these questions are really good. And you're really, see how I just paused? You're really good at putting the words together and getting them to come out so eloquently. And how do you do that?
I think that's honestly just reps, because there are definitely times I naturally stutter constantly when I'm talking. I lead a group of people at work and I stutter throughout the day so many times, but I also try really hard to not beat myself up when I do it. And I know that what's honestly made me better as a manager at work is how much I've podcasted, because you have to kind of turn it on in a different way when you're live into a mic, because you're intentional with your words versus at work where I can kind of, mumble mouth a couple things and it's like I can get through it. I can pull something up as a reference, be like, you know what I mean? Yeah, that. But I can't do that in this space because people can't see me, or if they can, great. And that helps when I talk with my hands. But I don't know. It's the reps. And then if you have your 5 questions right in front of you, just having that natural progression and being able to shake it off and be like, okay, I know I need to get to this question. I might let my brain think between question A and question B and then write down a couple of things. Okay, I want to make sure, explore that thread, do that next. So having a pen next to me while I'm interviewing is also helpful as well, because then I can remember, oh, we touched on that. Don't forget to come back to that. So it's just reps and, allowing yourself to mess up, because you're definitely going to mess up, and not being mad about it later.
Yeah, exactly. It's all I can say is you get better as you go, like you were saying. And I know that when I first started, it was probably like, and now it's getting there where I can at least kind of form sentences and questions.
You do a great job. You're beating yourself up so much, but I listen to your stuff too, and it's great.
I'm glad that you listen to my stuff. But I want to ask, do you ever go and listen to like some of your older stuff, some of the things that you have done to see how you've grown?
Sometimes, but to be honest, I really don't go back and listen immediately, just because I get so self-conscious hearing my own voice. I'm just like, you know what? It was a chapter and I did it. And then if something's bothering me that I know I messed up, then I'll go back and listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, I'm like, you know what? That was yesterday. Today is a different day. We try it again. And I think that maybe it's almost like, when some of those actors, they're like, oh, I don't watch myself in movies. It's like, well, I understand that in a little bit, because I kind of don't want to see what I did before. I want to just try something new this time and continue to try different things, because I don't want to sound the same as I did before. I want to always be different. So sometimes I do, not very often. I probably should, because I definitely think it helps to kind of review your own notes, but also I like to challenge myself to try different things every time.
When you first got started doing this podcast, was there something that maybe you focused on too much that people who are wanting to start an interview podcast could probably look at and be like, oh, there's a way to do this differently, or I don't have to do this at all?
I would say being over ambitious, not just in interviews, but in other podcasts, for myself and for other ones that I've been a guest on, when you have a list of notes that is 4-5 pages long, you're setting yourself up to fail when you're like, oh, I got to get through all these things. Because now what you're doing is you're forcing yourself to rush. And when you feel like you're in a rush, that's when you're going to really have those mess ups, those moments where you feel like, oh, well, I really messed up that word. I got the team wrong. Well, it's because you're rushing. Don't put a time limit on yourself so that you have that extra anxiety. We all have extra anxiety when we're in a rush, trying to get to the grocery store because we've cut time short on our schedule for the day. Like, you're going to make mistakes when you're in a rush. So trying to eliminate that is probably one of the best pieces of advice I can give. If you have a goal of 1, 2, 3 subjects, great. But don't beat yourself up if you don't get to that third one, because you got really good content in between.
Love it. Yeah, I always feel like, oh man, I missed talking about some of the things that I really wanted to talk about, but I'm like, whatever, I got other stuff and I got good stuff. So, exactly. So doing an interview podcast versus doing a fantasy football only podcast, what is the biggest difference? Maybe not even like topic wise, but just like the biggest difference between the two behind the scenes, maybe?
Behind the scenes, I think that what's fun is like when you pull up a different person that you've interviewed. I know that we've both gotten to interview Matthew. So that, for me, you kind of look at him, and for me, and I know that you did this as well, you look at his career. He has had such an interesting career. So it's fun to be able to unpack that side of someone that you're interviewing, because it's like, well, they're not going to talk about their career on every single podcast they're doing. People want to
Right.
know from him, who's your sleeper this year? Cool. I'm not going to ask you that because someone else has probably asked you that. And it's fun to ask them that too, because maybe you get another nuance in there. But if your goal is to get other questions answered that maybe people haven't thought of, that makes it way more fun.
And some of the guests that you have on your show, are they like, wow, what a breath of fresh air that I don't have to talk fantasy like this entire, like it's not a big, because I know when people come on my show, they're like, wow, it's really cool that I'm not getting asked fantasy football questions.
For sure. No, I mean, and I try and send like, okay, I want to cover these 3 subjects, but we also want to talk about just get to know you in between. So I try and have little to no notes as possible. There's some people that are so scheduled that they're like, I need to know if I have to hit these marks because for whatever, network they're coming from, they obviously want to make sure that they're consistent from what they've previously recorded to what they're doing with you. So if I know I need to ask about so-and-so's injury and I am talking to Stefania Bell, which I was lucky enough to get to talk to her once too. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to make sure that I have that underlined, give her that note ahead of time because she's going to want to, for her, she's, that person that's going to want to ace it as well. So she's going to want to bring her best self on that one subject. So I'll make sure to give her that note. But besides that, being like, oh, we're just going to talk about your career, where you came from. You grew up here. I'd love to hear more about that. Giving them just those couple little notes. They're like, okay, they can get more relaxed. And when they come on relaxed, like I knew just getting to talk to you today, I was like, oh, I don't have to worry about this. It's just Casey and I getting to hang out. This is going to be really fun.
For sure.
It makes it a lot easier. And you can hear that your guest is more relaxed as well because they're not wondering what you're going to throw at them.
Yes, and that is important. And I went into it when I first started by giving so much information that like you don't really have to do all of that. So calm down, homie, calm down.
No, but it's fun. What I love about listening to you too is I can hear your passion in the way that you talk and the way that you ask questions too. So for me, like, I mean, I'm lucky enough to kind of know you in a way. Like, we haven't actually physically hung out. I feel like I know you, but like, that's what I love about listening to your stuff is like, I can hear your personality. I can hear your excitement and different things. So for me, that's why I like listening to you.
Well, I like listening to you because you're great to listen to because guys, if y'all haven't listened to her podcast, you need to, because like I said, there are some people that, they kind of fumble over, but you never seem to, and if you do, I mean, you pick yourself back up, so it's all good. I'm not really seen that. I'm just saying that seems like something you would do.
That's honestly part of I know that I didn't grow up playing football. I know that this is a new thing for me. So I'm not going to hold myself to the standard of someone that has played this sport growing up, knows the ins and outs of every single playbook. I'm not going to hold myself to that standard because I just can't. That's too much. That's too much pressure. So for me, it's just, I want to have fun. And if the goal is just to have fun, then I'm already going to set myself up for a win because I just want to have fun. This isn't like, I'm not doing this for any other reason than I enjoy it. It's just a pure place to come from.
You brought up Stefania Bell and how you got to talk with her. And I know talking with you is comfortable because I have talked with you before. But when you have people that come on your show that you've never talked to before, you know of them, and maybe they're larger names than some other people. People know, household names, if you will. How are you feeling when you have to go talk to someone that you've never talked to before? What's the thought process there?
Definitely nervous. I think probably one of the people I was most intimidated to talk to was Cynthia Freeland because she's just the complete opposite of me in that she's just that amazing, brilliant numbers person that I just wish I could just listen to her talk all day because the way she talks about numbers and stats, I'm just like, I wish I knew how to think that way, but like I just can't. Like it's so hard for me. And right before we started recording, I was like, I gotta be honest, I'm really nervous. I appreciate everything that you do so much. I just have no idea how you do it. She's like, oh, well, we'll just unpack it together and that's going to be a fun experience for people. I'm like, okay. So know that people know they're meeting you two for the first time, just like anyone else meeting someone. Maybe they're nervous, maybe they're not, but they also know, okay, they're a professional first and they're going to be, if they're nice enough to say they want to be on your show, they're going to be there and be supportive because they know that you don't do this as much as they do. So naturally they all, at least my experience is everyone's been very supportive and very much like, no, you know what, you're trying and it's appreciative for me to see that you try to do this thing because you love it. And what they hear from you is you're a passionate person about something that they've made a career out of, and they appreciate that a lot. So just being able to set that aside and be like, okay, they know that they do this for a living, and they also know that you don't do this for your entire living. Right. So having that understanding, I think, helps take a bit of the pressure off.
And I looked at a bunch of like questions that were on message boards about podcasting for beginners because I like to figure out what other people, if we have the same questions. So one of the questions I saw was, how do you get people to come on to your show? So is there anything that people can do to get people to come on their show without coming off as like, oh my gosh, 24/7 in your inbox?
For sure. I mean, I think to me, what's kind of a natural, nice progression. Obviously, everyone can reach out to people on Twitter. People are normally very good about replying that way. Now, obviously, you shouldn't go and follow them on, you should follow them on all types of social media. That's fine. Follow them wherever. But don't follow in a way of, I'm commenting every single picture you're posting. I am sending you DMs everywhere, because then you're just going to be annoying. But, there's no harm in asking. So if you're on Twitter and you can tell that they're on because they're replying to other stuff, that's your opportunity because you know that they're actively there. That's when, you can say, hey, I'm a huge fan of yours. If you happen to have time, could I please have you on my podcast? And either they'll like and say yes, or like send me a DM, or they won't. And you have to understand that obviously everyone has a busy schedule and you're not going to get tons of yeses, but you're also not going to get a yes if you don't ask. If you don't ask, no one's going to jump on your show because they're like, oh, I think I heard someone thinking they would like me on their show. No, you have to ask. You have to just politely say, hey, I'm just, a big fan. I loved your take on this. I would love to have you on my podcast to talk about this subject more. There's no harm in asking, but it's just politeness is always the first thing that's going to help open doors. Be humble, be polite, and people will be very receptive to that.
Is there somebody that you haven't talked to yet that you may want to, interview in the future, or somebody, even even be on a podcast with them? Maybe if it's not even your own, but maybe like guest with somebody.
Oh my gosh.
It doesn't even have to be a fantasy football related person. It could be anybody if you want.
To be honest, I would really love to interview Mike Tomlin, just as a Steelers fan, the way that I am, and knowing how good of a coach he is. And I have so much respect for this man. He's done so much with this team in so many different ways. I would love to just be able to hear from him. Obviously, going into every season, it's not the same, but you're same, but different, that kind of saying. And I want to hear from him, like, if there's a different ritual he has to prepare for just like shaking it off and, creating a new playbook, or how he dusts things off and how he goes about getting into this whole new mindset of like, that was last year, we're going into this year. I would love to hear how he cleans the slate to get pumped, and how he will go into finding ways to inspire his team, because he can inspire his team so many different ways every single Sunday between quarters. You can see this guy working. He is someone that players love as a coach, and you can see that on the field. You can see it in their performances. So I just want to hear just from him, like, how does he tap into these new ways to inspire people? How does he find inspiration himself? Like, to me, he inspires me in different ways. And I don't know him. I've never talked to him. But if I got to talk to him, I'd be like, you inspire me. How do you find these ways? Because someone that does that every single day, they have to have an insane self-care regimen or something that's going to help refuel those tanks. So I'd want to hear from him. How does he manage to do that year in, year out, Sunday in, Sunday out?
Yeah. Somebody needs to get on that right now, make that happen, because I will listen, and I know I know a lot of people would. So somebody help out.
Has a Twitter, so it's like not like I can slide into his DMs, but like if I could just put it out in the universe, just kind of like the secret, like Oprah, just like, if I just put it out there, maybe it'll happen. But like, if I reach out to the right people, maybe I can make it happen. God, that would be amazing.
If you're listening to this and you're his second cousin's barber's best friend's car dealer, please help us out. We're looking for. All right. So you brought up Twitter, and I want to know, when did you find out about fantasy football Twitter? Because that's a whole different beast than Twitter.
Yeah, I would say I had a Twitter years ago, and just because I made it. And of course, you can tell that I was not really thinking about how to make a Twitter handle, because I just put my full name, like Samantha R. Holt. Like, I might as well have just added my social security number at the end, because I put the whole thing there. It's like, crying out loud, Sam, can you just like abbreviate? But I got more into fantasy football Twitter through the experience I had on Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life app. If you guys haven't played around on that, you totally should, because it's a really fun environment, and it's very much its own complete community on its own. But getting to interact with some of those people off and onto Twitter kind of was another whole other platform, and I got to meet a whole bigger group of people as well. And so now that's kind of my crew of people, and I'm very much in love with the entire experience. I know that there's positives and negatives to Twitter on its own, and every community has, good days and bad days. But at the end of the day, I do just love how supportive this community is. I really appreciate it.
And, right now is the season for the Scott Fish Bowl, which is a big community thing. Like, it's an event. It's on everybody's calendar. So,
for sure.
Or what? I assume, but for the average listener, are you in the Scott Fish Bowl this year?
I am in the Scott Fish Bowl this year. I was in last year. Did not have a good season last year. But this year I'm going to try and do less leagues so I can do better in each of them, because I think I was in way too many last year. And obviously, if you're spread too thin, you're not going to be your best self. So I am going to try hard to have less leagues this year, and as a result, hopefully do better. So I'm in the Scott Fish Bowl again this year. Excited for it. I'm in the Aerosmith League, which I'm very excited about. And I'm just looking forward to I can't wait to see where I am in the draft, so I can do as many mock drafts as I can before it, because last year I don't think I did enough. Mock drafting is key. You got to get those nerves out. You got to see where players fall, so I can have a good team this year.
Yeah, I've been trying to do a few mocks because I know I'm in the 7th spot, and I'm like, that's an interesting spot. Let's just say
that whole.
I chose it too, so
you know,
yeah.
Oh my gosh!
Hey, it's like a lucky number, so I'm like, I'm gonna go, and one year it'll hit. I think I was 7 last year too, so
nice. It's gonna hit. I really like the 3. I like the 3-4 spot, but then if I'm not there, I do like to be at that 11-12 for that back turn whole draft. I do like that spot too.
Talking about being in so many leagues and being in too many leagues even, how do you realize that maybe you need to cut back?
When it's Sunday morning, you're just sweating and you're like, did I check Yahoo yet? No, I haven't done that. No, MFL. I have to do that one. Hit submit. I clicked on too many players.
Yes.
Having that kind of back and forth stress when you've been traveling or something and you got a set of all of your lineups, it's like, okay, I have to do less next year. I have to do less. So the goal is to do less this year. I have 4 leagues on Sleeper, and I have 2 on MFL and 1 on ESPN as of right now. Hopefully I can keep it to that. I'll have to say yes, because it's fun.
I did too. And now there's so much charity behind everything. Then I'm like, I have to say yes. It's charity.
Like, crying out loud, this is a good cause.
Yeah, it really is. So you don't have to feel bad about it. And that's how I explained it to my wife when we're missing money in the bank account. And it says PayPal. Why does it say PayPal?
You're like, well, babe, it was for a good
cause. I'm helping out.
Yes.
Everything. All right. But yeah, it is a huge event, and it's a huge deal. And I know that some people are on the outside looking in, but if you're not, and I want to make this announcement to everybody, if you're not in, that it's still an awesome event. It's still an awesome cause, and you should still get involved with donating to charity in your leagues. So if your leagues can put that kind of aspect into it, like Scott Fish always says, even just like put a little bit aside and have that, extra whatever built in even. So being in that division, do you know any of the people that you're playing against?
I don't. It's a whole new group of people for me, which is kind of fun.
Yeah,
also, kind of intimidating because I'm like, I don't know everyone. Is this okay? And then, but you have to understand that lots of
Mhm.
other people feel the exact same way that you do. Like, I don't know anyone. I'm new here. Okay, we're all joining this room brand new and it's totally fine. So just look at it as another opportunity to get to know new people and to find out the nuances and how they draft and have that affect the way that you draft later. Like I love to look at the teams that we end up with post draft and be like, oh, they did so good with that spot. How did they get that person?
Right.
Because, you can mock draft to no end and hopefully you have a fantastic draft. But if you don't,
Mhm.
and you have other drafts that you can have coming up, okay, well, I see that they were in that spot and they got this person that can help me change my strategy too.
And what's your favorite type of league to play in, or even a specific rule that you are a huge fan of?
I'm falling more and more in love with Superflex as the years go. And I think I don't know if it's just because I love the points, but I also love that it's commitment, but it's not that much commitment because you have two quarterbacks that you can lean on. I kind of really like that. I also love the way that format allows players to fall because if people are quarterback hungry early, you're going to
Mhm.
get a lot better value later on receivers, on running backs. You can even find some people tend to forget certain players when you have that type of draft. So then you're like,
Yeah,
yes, I snagged that guy and no one
it's
saw
the
that he
best.
fell.
Yeah,
So fun.
it's the best. It's the best. So we're getting towards the last portion of the evening, and so what do you have going on with yourself right now? Like, what is in the fold for Sam?
Well, the next big thing for me this year, I was really grateful to have people reach out to me to join their networks, but I got the opportunity to join Dr. Roto, and he has a brand new platform that is going to be unfolded, and I'm very excited to be a part of it. It's an entire site that's going to have rankings, tools, all these fun amazing things that you get to sign up for and you get to be a part of as a paying customer. You're going to get tools that not every other site has, and you are literally going to have so many amazing things at your fingertips through this site, and you're going to have so much content geared just for you as a member. I'm excited to be a part of this team. It's about 20 people. It's a huge, huge network that it's going to be so big and so fun. I'm going to be podcasting with Derek Tate. I'm very excited that he and I are going to
Awesome.
be together again, reunited. It's going to be awesome. And also going to be writing at weekly. So you guys are going to get to hear not just me podcasting, but you're going to get to have a lot of articles from me. And there's going to be radio as well. So you'll get to hear me on Sirius XM, which is
That's
super
awesome.
freaking cool. And something I never thought I'd be able to say. Like, I'm going to be on the radio and be like an analyst for people. Yes. So I'm very excited. It is all kicking off and the site will be live. I want to say July 15th, I think is the official date that it's going to be live. But now I get to tell you and unleash this on the world. I've been keeping this secret in for like 2 months, and it's
Have
so
you
hard to
really?
keep a secret.
I mean, I remember coming on your show, and I know that you had just found out something when I had come on your show, and you couldn't tell me. So you were
That was
like,
exactly it.
okay, you were like all red, and you're like, okay, I'm calming down. Let me calm down. I was like, it's fine. I get it.
Literally, like that. Right before I recorded with you, I had the phone call with Doc, and that was him telling me about it, saying, I want you on this network. And I was
Mhm.
like, I have to like get my shit together to tell Daisy. Oh my god, I want to tell her so bad, but I
I
can't.
know.
And now I finally get to tell you. So this is full circle. We get
I
to
was
complete
wondering
this
if it was the
loop.
same thing. Yeah,
It
I was
is.
wondering.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh, that's so cool. I love that we got to complete the
I
circle
mean,
together.
you did tell me you'd tell me, so here we go. I'm glad I'm in the know, and now
You're
everybody
the
else
first.
is. So
You're the first person that knows.
hey,
So
man, this is what a milestone! Wow, and this is going to be what, episode 30. So what a great time to have this news drop. I'm really excited for you. That's couldn't happen to a better person. So I'm really
oh,
glad
thank
to
you.
hear that. And I look forward to seeing all the stuff that you guys all have to bring, because I'm sure it's going to be excellent.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited. It's obviously same thing like what you talked about earlier. Like you're in a room of people and you're like, I'm new here. And a bunch of them know each other. But at the same time, it's super exciting because they all come from amazing backgrounds. Obviously, Dr. Odo comes from Sports Illustrated. He has a lot of other people on the team that come from there. They come from different parts of the whole fantasy scape. And it's just going to be this amazing allegiance of all these different types of people to create amazing fantasy content. And it's a big group of amazing NFL writers as well. And I'm just excited to be part of the crew, and to be counted an equal among them is so humbling. I'm just grateful to be that they even asked for it. I'm so excited to be with them.
That is so awesome. And I know there are a lot of people out there that are trying to move up and get, more exposure and be with these awesome things like what you have going for you. So it's really cool to see the progression. How long have you been a part of this industry?
I want to say I've been, I would say, an active member at least 6 years now. 6 or 7 years. Time keeps flying by.
I know, right?
But yeah, it's been quite a long time. And what's great about this new opportunity as well is they're going to have a very specific target on not just charity, like we talked about before, like a portion of proceeds that go to every membership are going to go to charity, which is also super exciting. But also there's going to be a mentorship program. So if you are coming up and you want to be exposed to this and try your hand at these things, there is a whole membership for it that is for mentoring, and you get to come on and chat with us. We get to help you with your writing. There's going to be this giving back. And that was really important to Doc in a part of this network, is that you would be able to give back to people that are trying to get into the industry as well. So that's something that I'm really excited to be able to contribute to as well.
I love that. That is so great. It's so cool to see something different and also to see like the community come together like that to help each other out. Because honestly, to me, I know some people are always like, oh, it's competition, blah, blah, blah. But to me, sure, that's one part of it. But also we're kind of like a family. So it's cool to be able to help each other out and have like that little sister, that little brother you can take under your wing and help out.
Absolutely. And I mean, yeah, sure, you can look at it as competition, but every year, every team has to fight to win again. So, and they're still trying for it. And there's always new players in the league. There's always veterans. There's always rookies. And just like the league, everyone ends up getting along and playing together anyways, getting along. But at the same time, we're all in this together. It's a whole system. And the more people that we get in, it's just going to make those that have been doing it longer want to push harder, but also want to be able to mentor those that are coming in, because they were someone that was coming in new not too long ago. And it's super fun to be able to just be like, oh no, I can give you that advice on that. Don't worry about that. And you have that person that literally was there in your shoes, giving you that advice. It's just so fun to be able to give back in that way. And it's exciting to see someone go through the ropes and try different things, try different articles, and you get to see them jump around on podcasts. It's just fun to see people grow.
It is. And I love that. There's so many, like a new crop. I feel like there's a new wave that just comes in like every month. I'm like, wow, there's so many people out there that I don't follow or don't interact with that I don't even know exist and don't know that I exist. So it's just crazy to think about.
Yeah. There's a whole group of people that don't even know you and I, and we're going to get to know them and I'm like, oh, they're super cool. And then we're going to get to know them and be like, you guys are super cool. So it's just fun to again, it all boils down to at the base. We're all fans of football or a sport, if you're just into fantasy sports or a different something else. And you're coming from a place of just being a fan, being in love with this activity. And it's just fun to be able to talk to someone else that also has that shared passion. And if you're just talking about stuff that you love, it's always going to be fun. It's always going to be new. It's always going to be fun and exciting.
It always is. It always is. Also, guys, this is episode 31, not episode 30. I wanted to throw that in before we left because 31 is going to be my new lucky number. So here we go. Yeah, there we go. So Sam, it's been great having you on the podcast. It's been great getting to hear, your news and all that stuff and for you to be able to share that. So I'm just happy that you could do that. Can you go ahead and tell everyone where they could find you and find all of your stuff that you got going on?
Absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at Samantha R. Holt and head on over to drroto.com. The site, again, will be live on July 15th. If it comes out sooner, just follow me on Twitter, follow Doc, and you guys will be able to be in the know when everything is available for you to sign up. It's literally going to be so many tools, you guys. It's going to be such an amazing site. I cannot wait for everyone to see it. I'm just super excited. So yeah, Samantha R. Holt on Twitter. That's where you can find everything and links to all of my stuff. Go on YouTube to Fantasy Focused, and you can see my previous one-on-one with episodes. If you just search on YouTube, one-on-one with Sam Holt, you will find it.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, everybody go check out all of Sam's work. Very awesome to hear about the new gig, and look forward to all that awesome stuff. So, all right, everybody, we'll see you again next week. Remember to stay rad. It's episode 34.